it's a Mercedes. They don't care if it's a Mini. They're just trying the doors to see who can get in. So that's the same thing that's what's going on in the SMB space. The attackers are out there, but they're doing it over the internet.
With 40 years in IT, a Microsoft MVP legacy, and 25 years running his own MSP, Wayne Small has seen it all. Now, as the founder of the Cyber Advisory and a driving force behind the SMB 1001 cybersecurity framework, Wayne is on a mission to protect small businesses from the threats they don't see coming.
At the end of it all, the customer nearly lost $400,000 in one invoice alone. Security is never done. Don't think security is a product. It's a culture that you need to bring into your business.
Wayne, you've effectively completed the IT game. And what I mean by that is you've got 40 years of success. You've had a massive company which you've sold. You've been in the elite Microsoft status, MVP status for many years. But for those who are listening to this, who is Wayne Small today? And what is it that you're advocating for the small grassroots or SMB businesses?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your user base, because the SMB space is something that I've been in for many, many, many years. Back in my career, I had the opportunity to work in corporate. I worked with what was one of the world's largest PC manufacturers for many years. And I decided after that that the SMB space is where I feel we can have the most difference. And so I'm very passionate about talking to SMB business owners and technology providers in the SMB space. My background is that for 25 years, I had my own MSP that focused on the SMB technical space here in Australia. We had clients right around Australia that varied from one-person operations to 250-person operations. We had a staff of just under 60 people, of which nearly half of them were technical people. And I headed up the technical side of that business in delivering solutions to our clients, fixing problems. So I can talk tech to the cows come home, but I can also quite happily talk to the board or the janitor who might not understand all the technical terms. And that's probably one of my superpowers, is that I could explain the internet to my grandmother if she was still with us, and she would understand what that means. These days, I'm doing a couple of different things. I have been fortunate for the last couple of years to be the CEO for SMB IT Professionals. And that's an industry association that gets together over 170 SMB-focused technology providers around Australia and New Zealand to do really good things in the community. We collaborate together, we build best practices together, that type of thing. And it's a growing community that has roots back to something that I kicked off 20 years ago here in Australia. Outside of that, I run my business called the Cyber Advisory. It's my next stage of life. As I had my MSP, I recognized some of the challenges that we have in the SMB space around cybersecurity. And I was doing cybersecurity in that business for many, many years as one of the many things that we did. These days, I'm focusing on doing cybersecurity alongside MSPs and technology providers and work directly for the end customer so that I can be the auditor, if you like, to what the MSP has done, because none of us get it right all of the time. But with two different sets of eyes on it, we can get more of it right more of the time. So that's what I'm doing now.
That's amazing. That's such a great career. And the evolution, the growth, I think it's perfect in alignment. And I had Luke Irwin on a couple of weeks ago, I should say, and same thing. His approach is like yourself, and the reason I agree with that. And I'm in the industry. I'm an MSP, if you like. And yes, if you leave it to your IT team or person to not just implement, but mark their own work, then it's kind of like giving a student their own exam to mark. And, I'm going to say up front, I'm giving myself an A+.
Yeah. It's more than that, I think, is I noticed over time, we built some really good procedures in my MSP, and the techs built those beyond what I could take them, and that was great. But there were times where I would do a random audit, cross-check some of our guys' work, as you should do, and find a few things missing. And that's what made me think, well, who's doing this for the work we do? What if I miss something? Am I leaving a customer open? Is that an exposure for the client? And it's something that that sat heavily with me, and I didn't have an answer because I had worked with other security companies before. And unfortunately, the experience wasn't good because those security companies would come in, they would have a product that they're trying to sell. They would have something where they're trying to get you to buy their product, and whatever you've done in good interest for the customer would be wrong, according to them, because it wasn't their product. And that was something I was always challenged with, finding somebody to partner with that wouldn't stab me in the back. I'm quite okay if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, Wayne, we've checked out your client. We've found these things that aren't quite right. Is there a reason they're like that?" Because I'm willing to bet 90% of the time there's a reason that they were like that, a business reason, or potentially a request from a senior person at the company that something was like that. And without that understanding, it looks bad. So what I do these days is I go in, I work for the end customers, I work alongside the MSP, and I mimic that behavior. If I see something, I'm going to talk to the customer and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" The customer will go, "Oh yeah, we've done this, this, and this." I'm going to go to the MSP and talk to them and say, "Why is this like this? Why is the CEO not got MFA?" And they might find out that the CEO is in writing demanded he not have MFA. Or the MSP has recommended a product to the customer, and the customer just thinks the MSP is trying to sell them more stuff. That I can help understand the business risk and convey that independently, because I don't make a buck out of what the MSP is doing. I only get paid by the customer, and it's in their best interest. So they tend to trust me a little bit more than, this thing that the MSP might be in good faith selling them and the customer needs, but they don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like there's a big confusion when people say, when you like, if you use the term MSP, IT comes to mind, right? But let's be realistic. There's so many like, am I a web designer? Am I a Microsoft 365 expert? Am I an infrastructure expert? And it's the same for cybersecurity. So it's, like, what do you do in cybersecurity? I mean, I'm never going to call myself an expert for, for a long, long time, because that can get tricky very quickly. But like, I think we checked it the other day. There's like 46 branches of cybersecurity that are completely different to each other. So I might be a policy guy, nothing to do with hacking, or I might be a hacking guy. I love to hack, so I'm red team. I love to defend, so I'm blue team. So having the understanding, however, at the level that you've got, means that you take that perfect approach of balancing out what the client needs, fitting in those components, and then advising them accordingly. Because as you said, it doesn't matter who the vendor is. It doesn't matter what the technology is. You're not going in with that approach. You're just saying, listen, we need two-factor authentication. Therefore, what are you using? Microsoft? Okay. We know Microsoft has the ability to enforce this. Go for it. Google, identical. But if you're using Google, I'm going to suggest that you do the phone as well as, the app, and maybe an SMS as a backup, because we don't trust that technology. But you're not telling them what vendor to use, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm across a number of different vendors, and whilst I don't claim to be a guru, I actually had that discussion with somebody this morning. I feel sometimes imposter syndrome creeping in because I know that I don't know it all. And I think in that respect, sometimes that means that I ask more questions than I have answers, or I know the right people to go to. And I worry about those in the industry that do know it all. They're the dangerous ones. But let's roll back for a minute, because one of the things that I find that small business owners are lacking is any kind of policy or standards within themselves. And what do I mean by that? They'll go to their IT guy and say, "What do you think our password should be?" And their IT will go, "I reckon if you make them random and 16 characters," and that pretty quickly becomes unworkable for the business. Okay. So their IT guy goes and sets a password policy that he thinks is right. Here's best practices. Okay. But the customer doesn't have any documentation that says internally, this is what my IT policy is. This is what our standards are. They don't have any acceptable use policies. So when one of their guys uses a work computer to go and surf for websites that we probably wouldn't go to, and then gets infected by malware, how do they go, that's not acceptable? Because there's no guidelines. Okay. And I think that in the SMB space, we are too trusting. in some cases for our staff. And we are lacking clear guardrails, clear policies that mean our staff know what's acceptable and what isn't. Then you have your IT provider that comes in and they put on what they think without understanding, hey, you do or don't have policies. They should be asking you, what do you have a policy first? And so that's one of the things that I work with businesses on firstly, is setting those guardrails, setting those policies so that we've got something we can measure too. Because if you don't do that, how do you mark the test if you don't know what the answer sheet should be?
I love that. I wholeheartedly agree. And look, I'm not a GRC or a data governance cybersecurity policy guru or expert. However, in my learnings, as you said, over the years, has shown me that that is absolutely the path. And I did an episode on it last week. 3 key policies that a business must have, and implementing it. And it's, I guess, let's step back for a second. So when you think about a small business or, small, medium business, SMB, they generally have, and especially in Australia, and I do feel it's changing, but the general gist is, hey, Wayne, she'll be right. I'm a plumber. I'm just a cafe guy. Why in God's name would a Russian or Chinese hacker want to hack me? What's the reality? Can you explain that?
So I try to keep things simple. The reality is this. I live in a little estate here that's a circuit. There's 60 houses in our little estate. It's great. There's no gate at the front of the estate, so anybody can come in. And we have had an incident where people in the middle of the night will go around and test to see if anybody's left their car door open. And if they have, then they'll ransack the car. They don't care if it's a Mercedes. They don't care if it's a Mini Moke. They're just trying the doors to see who can get in. So that's the same thing. That's what's going on in the SMB space. The attackers are out there, but they're doing it over the internet. They're trying the doors to see if they can get in. And if they can get in, what can they get? Now, to take that analogy a little bit further, we had a situation where my wife's car, she'd left the doors unlocked and it's out on the drive. And the only way we knew is because we walked out the next morning and found the door ajar. And it was like, wait, didn't you lock it? And so we checked the security cameras that night and we found that somebody had been in her car that night. What was scary though, is the guy across the road, what we saw on the security camera was they drove off in his car because he left his keys in the car. So they got a lot more than they bargained for when they got that car. The car was found burnt out 40 kilometers away. But that was a guy that had a wife, a couple of newborn babies. He'd lost his car. Now, same concept in the small business space. It was all because somebody didn't lock the door. They didn't have a process to say, did you check that the doors are locked? And they didn't have any kind of security that will prevent somebody taking their car away.
That's a perfect analogy. And then let's step that up into something that you've been working with, and I believe helped even with many of its components, is the SMB 1001, which is what we call a framework. So opposing, again, going back to that, rather than, hey, Wayne, your small cafe it's not about the technology. It's about, here's a framework that says, here are the key things you should have in place. And this is what your IT guy, or we can provide. Can you give, the idea, like, let's pretend I'm your client. I've called you up. I found you online. I'm a small cafe and I've heard of this SMB 1001 and I want to go to this level they call silver and then aim to go for gold. So, maybe you can explain it a bit more so it makes more sense. How would we role play that?
Yeah, look, so what I would say to you, as a small business owner, is it comes back to the rules and the framework or the guidelines that you want to work within. There are a number of different cybersecurity frameworks or standards globally. Another one that people talk about is Essential 8. Now, SMB 1001 is absolutely brilliant in its design, very passionate about it, because I cottoned onto it about 2 years ago now and realized this was an answer to a problem that nobody had addressed. The problem was that in order to get secure to a certain level, you need to measure that level against a standard or a framework. Now, globally, the frameworks that have been designed or the standards that have been designed are designed for big businesses, not small businesses. Can a big business implement a big framework? Absolutely. They have the budget, they have staff to do that. But trying to implement something like that in a small business can be extremely difficult because it requires you to have technical people on staff, which your flower shop doesn't have. It requires you to have maybe a knock, which is where they're monitoring your systems 24/7, which we don't have in the SMB space. So those frameworks were great in theory, but they didn't apply to our space. Now, going back to, I think it was 2017, the Australian government had a wide range of security requirements, and they condensed it down to something called the Essential Eight. Now, the Essential Eight was effectively 8 technical controls, and I use that word carefully, technical controls. And those technical controls were things you could turn onto your computers to make them more secure. And the government basically said, if you only do these 8 things to varying levels, then you can be safe. Herein lies the problem. Firstly, they were technical controls. Earlier in our discussion, we talked about policies and having some kind of policy. That's lacking in the Essential Eight, in essence. So you either comply to these different levels of government controls or you don't. The second thing is that Essential Eight, there is no audit that you can do to get a tick that says, I'm compliant. You can have an audit done and somebody can say, yes, you're observing all of these controls, but there's no big badge that you can put out there saying, I'm compliant to this standard or this framework. With some of the bigger frameworks in the industry, we're talking things like ISO 27001, the CIS controls, NIST controls. They're things that you can get audited to and get compliance checked against. If you spoke to Luke Irwin a couple of weeks back, as you said, Luke is a guru of these things. And so I would encourage listeners to seek out whatever you've done with Luke and listen to that because he knows what he's talking about. But back onto SMB 1001. SMB 1001 was built from the ground up for the small and medium business owner. It's built with things that we can do, 6 things, for instance, to get to bronze. Those 6 things are the basic things that you can do to get on the journey that is cybersecurity. Many people look at cybersecurity as being a destination. It's a journey and you never stop. And that's something that I think is very important. You don't just get to a level and go, we're good, we don't have to do anything for 12 months, because the day after you do that, the bad guys will get in because you're not thinking about security. So SMB 1001 is an increasing level of standards. You've got bronze, silver, and gold, and they are all called what we call self-attested levels. Then you've got platinum and diamond above that. The platinum and diamond standard is where an external auditor will look at how your environment is set up, and they will independently verify that, yes, you are compliant. The bottom 3 levels are something where your technology provider or somebody like me can review your environment and go, yes, you have all of the requirements. You as the director can sign off and you make a legal commitment that says, I am compliant to this. So just as you would sign off on your tax returns, it's a legally binding document. Okay. And so SMB 1001 gives you that ability to get on that journey at very low cost and then build up as you go from there and as your business needs go from there. So I'm very passionate about SMB 1001, as you can tell. I am currently gold certified myself, and within the next couple of months, I'm going to go for diamond because that's important for me. In my business right now, I'm 2 persons, my wife and myself. She does some admin work for me, and I believe so strongly that I should be platinum is because of the kind of data that I'm protecting for my clients. I have, for instance, incident response plans for my clients that I'm helping them build. And that data, if somebody got that, could then predict how we're going to respond if they hack you. So they may use me to get to you, and I need to be protective of that data. So SMB 1001, it's a great way to get on the bus, as I call it, on that journey to get secure and maintain that security. Because with SMB 1001, every year you have to re-up and recertify to go, am I still compliant to this? Because I can tell you every year the standard changes. And that's something very important about SMB 1001. With most standards, the CIS, NIST, ISO standards, etc., Essential 8, they very rarely change. Do you think that the cyber attacks going on keep the same methods that they do this year and next year? No. They adapt. they will come at you in different ways. And so that's where SMB 1001 has a guaranteed update every year that is designed to keep you fresh with your cybersecurity protections. Now, with another hat that I wear, now I was mentioned earlier, I was the CEO for SMB IT professionals. I've now taken on a role as a technology evangelist for SMB IT professionals. And I represent SMB IT professionals on the SMB 1001 steering committee. That steering committee is made up of 20 different entities that help feed into what should be in the standard. What are the ways in which the bad guys are attacking us? What are the ways in which we could help protect customers better? And with the 2026 version, quite a large sum of what was contributed into this year's changes was written by the SMB IT professionals crew and was accepted by the other people on the steering committee as being valid and needed to help protect the SMB businesses. Things like SPF, DMARC, and DKIM, technical terms I'm using, but that's all around email security. And they were things that were missing from last year's version of the standard that are now here in this year's version. And they're things that people can do to protect themselves from being mimicked out on the internet. Protect, Bora from having people try and send me emails from dumb ways to get hacked and pretending to be like that. So there's some of the reasons why I absolutely love the SMB 1001 standard. It's community driven. They take massive amounts of feedback from the community. It's guaranteed updates where every year there's going to be a new version, and every year you've got to up your game to keep compliant, and which you absolutely need to do, because if you don't, you're going to be one of the statistics that get owned by the bad guys. And it's something that I think really is suited for the SMB space.
Yep. I'm going to put on a hat of what I deal with. Okay. And I'm sure you've dealt with a lot. That sounds all good, Wayne, but I don't understand. What does that mean? Do I need to go and pay for something? Do you need to pay for something? So I'm just a plumber. What do I do? How does this work?
Yeah. Okay. So let's bring it down to the business owner. And you're right. I did get off track there. As you can tell, I get passionate about this. The business owner, what they need to do, the very first part of the SMB 1001 standard is having a technology provider supporting you. Okay. Because either you have the internal skills to do tech or you don't. There's no, Google is not good enough. So you need to say, yes, I've got the skills to do that. And that's the very first tenet in the SMB 1001 standard. As a small business owner, there are ways that you can get access to get certified freely. There are ways through cyber wardens, which offer a lot of online training that you can use to get certified to the entry levels with minimal fuss and bother. But you have to do that in conjunction with your tech provider. And there's going to be some charges from your tech provider as they check these things are in accordance with the standards. But it's not something that you should be thinking you have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on. In the smaller end of town, I've gotten people certified in less than a day because all they need to do is do some training, for instance, get their SPF records set up properly, their email security, that is, put things like MFA on, and it's fairly easy to do. So it's not something that's overly onerous, and it's not designed to be onerous. It's designed to be easy to attain at the entry levels and easy to maintain at those entry levels. Again, the idea is bronze is for the flower shop owner, the 1-2-man operation that don't necessarily have a lot of data they need to protect, and the type of operation that is using potentially a lot of cloud services.
Yep. So what we're saying is if there are certain services that they use, like example, if they're using email, they're likely going to be on bigger chance on Microsoft 365 for business, or they're going to be on Google Workspace. And we have to trust that that environment there has certain levels of protection. But you, as my IT guy, will need to look at that and say, well, hold on, you don't actually have second factor or multi-factor authentication turned on. Therefore, if I have your password, I'm going to hack you, or you're going to be easily compromised. And the smart thing about training is, well, then I know even if I have that enabled and I keep getting a message on my phone saying approve login, and I'm not doing anything. Why am I getting this? I'm either going to cave and hit yes, or I'm going to do the typical thing is I'm going to call you, Wayne. I'm going to say, hey, I'm not sure what's going on. but this bloody app keeps bothering me and I can't do my work. What do I do, Wayne?
Yeah. And that's exactly right. That's the way in which a lot of people fall for these tricks. They have weak passwords and they get MFA fatigue, as I call it, which is where they just go, yes, 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 yes. And they don't realize that one of those attempts is from a hacker in Russia that now has their password because he's used the same password on his grocery shopping site as he does for his email because everybody does that. No, you shouldn't. And the hacker in Russia now has access to his mailbox. I had an investigation I did recently for a company in Queensland. I was called in to do an investigation. They had been hacked. I won't mention the provider that they were using, but they weren't buying Microsoft 365 directly from Microsoft. They were using another provider. And unfortunately, that other provider makes it so easy for customers to get set up with them that they take away all of these security features. They take away the ability to have MFA. They take away the ability to block people from logging in from outside of Australia. Most Australian businesses don't need to log in from outside of Australia unless the boss is on holidays. And so for 6 months, somebody sat in the admin manager's mailbox looking at all of the invoices that were going in and out. And they set up some rules inside that inbox to hide their presence. And they forwarded those emails off to another Gmail address. And at the end of it all, the customer nearly lost $400,000 in one invoice alone. And it was only through a mistake that somebody was by the way, we paid that invoice last week. Why are you asking about it now? And they were like, wait, what? You did? And they were able to stop the transfer going through. Now, these guys are a small engineering company, 8 staff in their office, 40 staff in the field. They work for some big, shall we say, industrial companies. That was one of them that actually stopped that process from going through. Or because they didn't have the right security in place, or because they didn't know, or because security was made easy for them.
I'd like to ask you, hopefully the final time as the small business owner, but you make it so easy for me to argue with. But you keep saying email security and mimicking me. I don't understand. I've got Microsoft, the best system in the world, right? So what do I need protection from and how does someone mimic me?
So a couple of things. Many people go, oh, I've got everything in Microsoft. Security is their problem. No. You own the data. Microsoft provide the car that you drive around in. It's your responsibility to drive that car properly, to put fuel into it. Okay. So the same kind of thing. It's your responsibility to make sure that things like MFA are turned on. And that means all of your mail comes from the Microsoft servers, right? The question is that there are different configuration steps you need to do to tell the rest of the world that the only valid place for my email is Microsoft servers. And if you don't tell the rest of the world that, then I could use a server over in China or Russia or even in Australia and pretend to send email from you. And your customers will accept that because you've done nothing to block that. Now, in technical terms, I'll just throw it out there. SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are 3 things that if configured correctly, and it literally takes an hour or 2 to get it right, then it will block that kind of thing. And it will tell the rest of the world, if the mail doesn't come from my Microsoft server, and if it's not signed a certain way, then you cannot accept it from me.
So you've got these 3, what did you call them? Protocols or something that proves that I am or my emails are who they claim to be. What is, explain that in simple terms again? Sorry.
So there are 3 things, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. SPF basically lists the mail servers in the world that are allowed to send from the cyber advisory, for instance, okay? And that tells the world that if it's not from these, then that's a bad thing, be suspicious. DKIM is, you know how you used to sign checks at the bank and you get presented that check and you'd look at the signature and say, yep, that's Wayne's signature. We'll accept that as authentic. DKIM basically is where your emails get signed digitally so that when they're received at the other end, if the signature is not there, then they'll go, ooh, how do I treat this? Is this authentic? And DMARC is what wraps these 2 together and it tells the servers on the internet if you get mails and it doesn't set up with SPF and DKIM, then either quarantine it or reject it. Unfortunately, some people have got there is another setting called none, which means don't do anything. If you get it, just ignore it. That's fine. That's a bad setting to have. But properly configured, those things will prevent anybody from pretending to be the cyber advisory, because then they cannot pretend to be from my mail servers. They cannot sign it from me. And mine is configured so that if anybody gets it, reject it. In other words, don't even put it in quarantine. Just discard it. It's not real.
So well explained. Now, I'm going to put on the hat of one of your IT MSPs or IT people that are part of the SMB professionals. And I'm going to say to you, so I've got this wonderful client. Let's just say they're a manufacturer, right? And they've got multiple departments. So starting at the top, you've got the owners of the business who may be involved in sales and may only be involved in marketing for the sake of, like, as a part of their day-to-day and manufacturing of diagrams. But then you've got accounting people, you've got your regular sales people, you've got your architects who draw on the apps. But I'm struggling to explain to these guys that even though that person is the owner or the architect per se, that they only need access to what they do for their day-to-day job, and we can turn things on and off if we need to. How would you explain that to a customer, like a small business right now, to understand what is the importance of this?
Look, I make it very simple. I go into the boss and if the boss thinks he needs to have access to everything, I ask him for his credit card and his PIN number. He won't give it to me. Why won't you give it to me? Well, because it's my personal stuff that's going to access all of my things. Right. Yet you want to allow all of your staff open access to these things? You might trust Bora, the guy who works for you, but what if his account is what gets breached and he doesn't know it? Then the bad guy will have the access that he has. So this is all about limiting the blast radius of any impact. And you used a number of different departments there, and we use the word least privileged access. So we give you the minimum you need to do your job. So the sales guys, they have access to all of the sales information. They don't need the finance information. They don't need the HR information. The owner of the business, too many times in the SMB space, they go, I need to be the global admin for all of this, just in case I need to do something. Well, firstly, they don't know what to do. That's why you're there. Secondly, they're more likely to mess things up by doing something that they've Googled on the internet, thinking they're doing the right thing, because they don't know the right question to ask. Side tangent, AI is only making this problem worse, because it just means they get the wrong answers faster because they don't ask the right questions. So least privilege access is what we want to establish. We want to make sure that everybody has the access to do what they want, and we want to limit the blast radius. So if the guy in the sales gets hit, then they don't get access to the company's profit and loss reports. They don't get access to the bank accounts. Something that also happens in the SMB space is all too often, one person can approve any bank transactions. And that's something that we need to be mindful of. You need to have two people approving bank transactions. You might go, well, Wayne, you're a two-person business. How do you do that? Well, quite easy. I put the uploads to say the bank transaction's going through, and my wife goes in to approve it, or the other way around. So that way, two pairs of eyes have looked at it and go, yep, that's right. That's what we do. Tick. Next, please. Okay. So it's really about giving that blast radius, that limiting of what can happen if something bad goes wrong, if the bad guys get in. And I just sit and talk to the boss. And once you have that discussion, they really understand more and more about why they don't want that responsibility. That engineering company I mentioned earlier, the hackers that got in didn't realize that the admin person had a global administrator account. The damage could have been far worse had they realized that. They didn't. And that was one of the blessings that we had for that particular client.
Yeah, that's definitely amazing advice. So what are the key messages that you want to say to every business right now? And yes, you can repeat everything you've already said if you like, but the key takeaways that you would tell any business no matter what.
Number one is security is never done. Don't think security is a product. It's a culture that you need to bring into your business. You need to make sure that everybody is breathing that security. I ran some training for a client a couple of months back, and there's two CEOs of the company. And in one of the training sessions, one of them wasn't present. And one of the staff had a post-it note on their keyboard. And I happened to notice there was something scribbled on it, and it was the password. They just changed their password that day. And that was what they did for the day so that they could remember that. And so we talked a little bit about that. Then at the next training session, the CEO that wasn't there had a post-it note on his laptop. I didn't call him out on it because the staff member did. So that's changing culture in the business and having your team not afraid to ask questions of the bosses if something doesn't look right or smell right or seem right. So security, don't assume that you've got it. It's not one and done. It's a journey and it's a cultural change that has to happen. Number two, listen to your tech providers when they tell you. They're not just trying to shove products down your throat most of the time. They're suggesting it for a reason. And if you don't understand, ask them to put it in simple business terms. What's the risk that this software is protecting me from? Or what's the risk that this change you're recommending is going to save me from? Why do I want to do it? Because security is this balancing beam. On one side, you've got security. The other side, you've got usability. We can make something very secure, but it's hard to use. Or we can make something easy to use, but it's insecure. So we talked a little bit about security being a journey. We talked about it being a balance. When you're talking to your tech providers, too many tech providers talk too technical because they don't know that you need it simple. Ask them to explain it in the terms of using cars and trucks and buses and roads. There is nothing that cannot be explained using simple terms if you ask, as the business owner, the questions. So how does this look like? What does that look like? How will I use this feature that you're giving me? How will this feature limit what I'm doing? Will it limit what I'm doing day to day? They're questions to ask, and you have every right to ask them as the business owner to find out how the product or the solution that they're giving you is going to help you protect your business.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. That's priceless. Every business, I think, regardless of how small or medium or large you are, that advice applies to every one of you. Definitely take that on board. So, Wayne, I want to wrap this up with a hypothetical question. So, I'm going to give you a magic wand, and if you could wave it and instantly delete one human behavior or behavioral flaw or a bad habit in business world that leads to cyber breaches, what habit are you erasing forever?
I would erase the habit where people click on anything to see the dancing pig. They click on anything to get to, that video of the funny dancing pig. They will put their credentials in and give their passwords away and answer the multi-factor prompt just to see the dancing pig. So I would make people more suspicious and get rid of that behavior where they would click on anything to see the dancing pig.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. The cat, I think, is a big one, or the monkey now.
Yep.
I heard about that monkey in a zoo somewhere that's got millions of views because it wasn't accepted by its own clan. And it's like, you're right. I would bet my bottom dollar. Many people I know would do whatever it takes to get what they think is a live feed or whatever it is, even though it's fake, because that's what hackers do, to get to that link. Wayne, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the energy you've given to be on our podcast today, for everything you've done for the SMBs of this country and the expertise that you still share with other MSPs and other small IT people and looking after customers. I think what you do benefits everyone from the small business, and it's a great value to our country to have amazing people like yourself. So thank you for your time.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share this knowledge. As you can see, I love sharing with anybody that stands still long enough to hear. And if I can help anybody in any way, I'm sure you'll be providing details for them to get hold of me, and I'd welcome that discussion.
How do people get in contact with you, Wayne?
So www.thecyberadvisory.com.au. That is what I do. I don't sell products. I sell advice, and guidance is really what I'm doing. And I can help you do it from incident response plans, disaster recovery plans, getting you compliant to SMB 1001 or Essential 8. They're the two that I focus on. More than happy to have a discussion with you. If you've got things where your tech provider is being too confusing, drop me a line. If I can help give you some guidance, I will. don't have a problem with that at all. Thank you so much.